let's get one thing clear, right out of the saloon. A real Wild West shootout was not a choreographed ballet of bullets. There was no dramatic music, no slow-motion reloads, and certainly no dust-covered cowboy drawing at high noon with the speed of a caffeinated rattlesnake. The truth? It was chaotic, clumsy, and over in less time than it takes to sneeze. You've seen the movie version. Two men staring each other down, squinting into the sun, fingers twitching just above their holsters. Then, bam! One falls, the other twirls his pistol and saunters off into legend. But if you were actually there, standing in the dirt of Dodge City or Tombstone with sweaty palms and an itchy trigger finger, you wouldn't see much of that. For starters, most gunfights weren't planned. They were messy, spontaneous, almost always fueled by whiskey and wounded pride. Arguments in the Old West escalated faster than a prairie fire in a hayloft. A spilled drink, a misheard insult, or a poorly timed joke could turn a friendly poker game into a lead-slinging disaster. Contrary to popular belief, people didn't square up in the middle of the street like dueling gentlemen. They shot from doorways, behind barrels, out of windows, under tables. Basically, from anywhere that offered the chance of not dying. That classic showdown at noon trope? Pure fiction. Real shootouts happened at all hours, usually after sunset, when everyone was drunk and had long forgotten their better judgment. Also, most people missed a lot. 19th century revolvers weren't exactly precision instruments. They misfired, they jammed, or just plain refused to cooperate, hitting a man-sized target from 10 paces while your hands were shaking from fear and adrenaline. You had better odds of lassoing a hummingbird. Survivor accounts tell us bullets often went wide, hitting nearby signs, lampposts, horses, or innocent bystanders. Newspapers loved to report shootouts, but what they left out was how many fights ended with nobody actually getting shot, unless you count someone's hat. And if someone did get hit, the results were gruesome. These weren't sanitized movie wounds. A .44 caliber lead ball to the gut didn't just knock you down, it turned your insides into soup. Without proper medicine, a single wound could mean days of screaming, infection, and a funeral that smelled like whiskey and regret. Let's talk gear. The iconic Colt single-action army revolver, also known as the Peacemaker, wasn't standard issue for every cowboy with a grudge. It was expensive. A decent one could cost more than a horse. That made it less of a necessity and more of a status symbol. Most folks carried whatever they could afford. Cap and ball pistols, derringers, worn-out army surplus, or the kind of handgun that made a click when you really needed it to go bang. And reloading? Forget it. Revolvers held 6 shots, but most shooters only loaded 5. Why? Because resting the hammer on an empty chamber kept the gun from accidentally discharging if it got bumped. That meant you got 5 tries to hit something before you were left clicking at your opponent like a confused raccoon. If you needed to reload mid-fight, you were probably already dead. Real gunmen didn't reload during shootouts. They ran, they dove behind cover, or they used the butt of the revolver like a club. Speed loaders didn't exist, and black powder cartridges weren't exactly user-friendly under pressure. You'd fumble with loose rounds, drop them in the dirt, while someone tried to turn your spine into a ventilation system. And the noise? Loud enough to rattle your teeth. A single revolver, shot in a narrow saloon, could make your ears ring for hours. Now imagine 4 or 5 people firing at once, in an enclosed space, filled with wood, mirrors, tin ceilings, and panic. It wasn't a gunfight. It was a thunderstorm, made of gunpowder and screaming. And remember this, these towns were made of wood. Old, dry, creaky, ready-to-burn wood. One stray shot into a lantern or a bottle of rot-gut moonshine could turn a tavern argument into a full-on inferno, which, historically speaking, happened more often than you'd think. In more than one case, the shootout was forgotten, because the entire saloon went up in flames and took half the block with it. But if you did manage to land a hit, the aftermath wasn't glamorous. You didn't walk away with a cool scar and a mysterious reputation. You walked away with a limp, if you walked at all. Bullet wounds weren't clean. They shattered bones, tore flesh, and invited infection like an open bar. A gut shot meant a slow death. A lung shot meant a wet, bubbling gasp. A limb hit might mean amputation, done with a saw, no anesthetic, and someone to bite down on. Surviving a shootout didn't make you a hero. It made you a lawsuit waiting to happen. If the sheriff didn't arrest you for murder, someone's cousin might ambush you the next day. Wild West justice was often served cold, and usually with another bullet. So, who was actually doing all this shooting? Let's bust another myth. Most gunslingers weren't professional outlaws or legendary sheriffs with engraved pistols and tortured pasts. They were bartenders, farmers, blacksmiths, gamblers, debt collectors, and occasionally the guy who just lost too much at poker. Famous names like Billy the Kid and Wild Bill Hickok were the exception, not the rule. The average gunman was just some guy with bad luck, worse judgment, and access to a firearm. And lawmen? They weren't always the good guys. Many sheriffs were elected not because of their heroism, but because they could drink more than the competition and had the decency to shoot outside town limits. Some doubled as bounty hunters. Some ran protection rackets. Others got into shootouts themselves, then wrote the incident report in their own favor. Take the infamous gunfight at the OK Corral. It lasted 30 seconds. 30 seconds, that's it. Less than half a minute of screaming, powder smoke, and missed shots. And yet, it became one of the most mythologized events in Western history. Why? Because it had everything the newspapers loved. Family feuds, shifting alliances, a town divided, and a shootout that left 3 men dead, and a reputation that echoed for a century. But even in that famous brawl, things weren't as clear-cut as Hollywood made them. The good guys were questionable. The bad guys were drunk cattle rustlers who may or may not have been armed. Witnesses contradicted each other. The courts couldn't agree on who shot first. And by the time the smoke cleared, everyone involved had enough legal trouble to fill a saddlebag. The truth is, most Wild West towns had more lawsuits than shootouts. If you pulled a gun on someone in broad daylight and didn't have a badge or a mob behind you, there was a decent chance you'd be in court before you were in the grave. And yet, shootouts still happened. Fast, loud, and stupid. 1 minute, you're arguing over who gets the last room at the boarding house. Next minute, you're firing wildly at a man hiding behind a trough. Horses screamed, dogs barked. Innocent bystanders dove for cover, and someone inevitably got shot in the foot while trying to escape. Half the time, nobody could even say what started it, but by God, it ended with a bang. Now let's talk environment. The setting of your average shootout wasn't some photogenic ghost town with tumbleweeds and perfect lighting. It was a cluttered, stinking mess. Dodge City smelled like manure, whiskey, and bad decisions. Tombstone? Dust, gunsmoke, and the faint odor of someone who hadn't bathed since the Lincoln administration. The wooden sidewalks were uneven. The streets were filled with horse droppings. And if it rained, congratulations. You were now having a gunfight in a mud pit. Visibility was awful. Shooting in the dark was like trying to thread a needle during an earthquake. Streetlights were rare. And most shootouts happened outside saloons, where the only illumination came from a flickering lantern or a window someone forgot to shutter. If you got shot, chances are no one could even see what happened until the next morning, when the undertaker dragged your body out of a horse trough. And let's not forget the weather. In the Southwest, it was often 100 degrees in the shade, which you couldn't find anyway. In the Rockies, it might snow in June. Imagine trying to aim a 6-shooter with frozen fingers while standing ankle-deep in slush. Now imagine you're drunk, because most people were. Whiskey was cheaper than clean water, and just about everyone had a bottle tucked in their coat. which means by the time someone drew their gun, they were already seeing double and shooting triple. Add in poor nutrition, dehydration, and whatever bacteria they picked up from drinking river water full of cow waste, and you had a recipe for wildly inaccurate, half-conscious mayhem. Speaking of mayhem, friendly fire was alarmingly common. Aiming was guesswork, and panic made everything worse. You'd draw fast, squeeze the trigger, and accidentally shoot your buddy in the kneecap. Many shootouts ended with more injuries from stray bullets than intentional ones. There are records of bystanders getting shot while trying to run away, while watching from windows, or, in one memorable case, while sleeping. One poor man woke up with a bullet hole in his hat and no idea why people were screaming outside. That hat was later sold for $3 as a miracle relic. It was the Wild West, after all. If you couldn't survive with your gun, you might survive with a good story and the right hat. Let's rewind for a second and ask, why were there so many guns in the first place? Because in the Wild West, being unarmed was basically a lifestyle choice that said, I trust strangers and rattlesnakes. Guns weren't just for shootouts. They were insurance, tools, fashion statements, and sometimes emotional support devices. You carried one while herding cattle, cleaning your teeth, or breaking up with someone. The gun wasn't the last resort. It was often the first. But there was an unspoken rule among respectable men. You didn't draw unless someone else did first. Unfortunately, respectable was a sliding scale, and someone else did first was often interpreted as, he looked at me funny. The result, dozens of men dead over things like spilled drinks, borrowed horses, card games gone sideways, or, in one recorded case, the wrong harmonica song played too many times. And don't think everyone wanted to be in a shootout. Many cowboys actively avoided conflict. But the code of honor, a loose, half-baked set of principles that changed with the weather, demanded action when your name or manhood was challenged. Someone called you a cheat? Better shoot him, or forever be that guy who didn't. It was social pressure, soaked in moonshine and gun oil. So, what happened after the smoke cleared? Well, first, silence. Not cinematic silence, just stunned, awkward silence. People blinking at each other, unsure if it was over, or if somebody was about to restart the shooting, because they just realized their hat got ruined. If you were lucky enough to still be breathing, your first move wasn't celebration. It was checking yourself for holes. Men often didn't notice they'd been shot until someone pointed out the blood. Adrenaline did strange things to the mind, like convincing you that your shattered femur was just a cramp. Many bled out slowly while insisting they were fine. The survivors usually wandered off in shock or collapsed where they stood. Bystanders crawled out from under wagons. Shopkeepers peeked out of shattered windows. Someone inevitably muttered, "Well, that escalated," and everyone pretended they hadn't just wet themselves behind the piano. Then came the local law, or what passed for it. If a marshal was in town and still sober, he'd shuffle over, scratch his head, and start sorting out the mess. If he liked you, it was self-defense. If he didn't, it was murder in the first degree. Either way, someone was probably going to jail, or leaving town very, very quickly. Because if you lived through a shootout, the real fun had just begun. The legal system. Frontier justice was a choose-your-own adventure. Depending on the town, the lawman might be an actual sheriff, an unpaid volunteer with a badge made from a tin can, or just the biggest guy in town who could read. If you were arrested, you might face a judge, who was also the barber, the grocer, and the only man in town with a clean shirt. Trials were flexible. Witnesses were often drunk, missing, or confused. Evidence included things like, he looked guilty, and his gun smells funny. If the town liked you, you walked free. If they didn't, well, hope you had a good hat, because it'd be auctioned off after the hanging. And let's not forget revenge. Justice didn't end at the gallows or the courtroom. A shootout was rarely a one-time event. It was often just chapter 1 in a long, bloody soap opera. Relatives, friends, and drinking buddies taking turns settling the score. You might survive the shootout, but get ambushed a week later while feeding your mule. Meanwhile, life went on. Bodies were dragged off, often by the undertaker who'd been watching the whole thing while casually measuring the victims with his eyes. Business was booming, and he charged extra for same-day service. Bullet-riddled doors were patched. The barkeep swept up the broken glass. And by sundown, everything looked just about normal, minus the bloodstains and maybe one fewer piano player. And if you think any of this earned you fame, think again. Unless a newspaper reporter happened to be nearby, your story disappeared into the saloon floorboards like spilled whiskey. Most shootouts didn't make headlines. They didn't become legends. They just became part of the town's whispered memory, passed around like a cautionary tale. Don't drink with Eli. He once shot a man over a misheard toast. The real gunslingers of the West didn't wear black dusters or have catchy nicknames. They were tired, angry, probably drunk, and in many cases, very bad shots. Now, let's talk about the people who didn't sign up for the bullet ballet, but got cast in it anyway, women and children. Most frontier towns weren't lawless bachelor pads. They were full of families trying to scrape together normal lives between dust storms and dysentery. And when the shooting started, everyone ducked. Women were often bystanders, witnesses, or victims. Bullets didn't discriminate. There are stories of school teachers catching strays through the window, mothers dragging children under wagons, or saloon girls getting hit while crawling behind the bar. One woman in Kansas was famously shot in both legs while trying to rescue a chicken during a street brawl. The chicken survived. She limped for the rest of her life. Children learned early, when the shouting starts, drop your candy and hide. Some kids grew up thinking gunshots were just part of the soundtrack of a Saturday afternoon. Others grew up to be the next generation of shooters, carrying the same grudges their fathers died for. So, who survived these messes? Luck, mostly. And sometimes, boots. The men who lived weren't always the fastest or bravest. They were the ones who ducked first, shot last, or just happened to trip at the right time. There's a famous case of a gambler in El Paso who survived 3 shootouts in 1 year, mostly by falling down during the first shot and staying there. Others survived by leaving town, fast. Cowboys who didn't want to die for their pride packed up and moved on before the next round of revenge came knocking. Some changed their names, moved 2 towns over, and suddenly became a businessman instead of that guy who shot Charlie. And a few just stopped carrying guns altogether. They'd had their fill of adrenaline, gunpowder, and funerals. These men were often labeled cowards, but funny enough, they tended to live the longest. And when all the bullets were spent, the blood scrubbed from the floorboards, and the last bottle of whiskey drained. What remained? Not much. No medals, no monuments, just a town a little quieter, a saloon with one more hole in the wall, and someone new behind the bar who didn't ask questions. Life in the West rolled on with the same dusty indifference it had before the shooting started. Because in the end, Wild West shootouts weren't about justice or honor. They were about ego, bad timing, and a whole lot of men who couldn't walk away from a fight they should have never walked into. The real tragedy wasn't who died. It was how often it didn't change a damn thing. So next time you watch 2 cowboys squint at each other while a tumbleweed rolls by, remember, real Wild West shootouts were short, sloppy, deafening, and stupid. They ended careers, friendships, and lives, not in slow motion, but in 10 seconds of blind terror and bad aim. There were no duels at high noon, no honorable salutes, just flint, fire, and fear. And if you were really lucky, you got to walk away, and maybe drink yourself into forgetting the whole thing by sunup.